Welcome to Monday, May 12th. I'm back. We're going to get into That Was Then, This Is Now with the book. Sorry. This is the sequel to The Outsiders. The way it goes into it, I'm trying to think of the preparation to give you. One, book-wise, I don't have your own copy of the book, so you'll have to read it here, and then you'll have to give it back to me at the end of the class, which is good and bad. You have to worry about taking it home all the time. The bad news is, as far as you getting it done, means if you fall behind reading-wise, you're going to have to borrow a book from me. The good news is, those of you who prefer the audiobook version, I have the audiobook on Blackboard, so you can go ahead and download and listen to it that way in case you fall behind and help you out too. The other part is, in case you didn't realize it, we have three weeks of school left. Of that 3 weeks, only 2 of it is left for me to do actual teaching, because that last week we have other activities we do. So if you're doing your math, 2 weeks means next week, this book is done. We're taking the final test and moving on next Thursday. So we're going to have this week and then that part of next week to get through it. So we're going to try and hustle through. The good news is it's shorter than The Outsiders, and it moves through a little bit quicker. I like it slightly more, goes back and forth. It's not quite as actiony as The Outsiders, but it's a bit more adult than The Outsiders was. I like The Outsiders a lot. It's one of my favorite books. It's one of the good things happens in. The thing with The Outsiders is, as much as it deals with good stuff, it's a lot of things that aren't necessarily going to relate to your life. The bullying is good in the fact, not bullying, but bullying is good in the book in the fact that it's that very relatable thing that happens in your life. But I don't think many of you are going to have to worry about a situation where a friend of yours shanks somebody in a park and you have to deal with that fallout. Or deal with the fact that you're going to get into a rumble with a whole bunch of other kids in some downtown area and what happens when your friend gets kicked in the head. Or what are you going to do when a church is burning down and there's small children into it and you go running into it. It makes for a fun book, but I don't think it necessarily connects to your life. This one, the sequel, connects to things that are going to happen to you much, much more. Deals in the same town. Different characters. You're going to deal with this dude named Mark and Brian. Ponyboy shows up as a friend. You guys remember the Shepherd gang that was in The Outside? They're in this one also. Curly Shepherd and then his brother Tim, thank you, are in this one also. And they're like sort of the bad guys that are dealing with the whole thing. And so they'll be in there. But this one, instead of dealing with bullying and the whole fight between the Socias and the Greasers, this one deals with drugs. And what's going to happen is it sort of follows this path by these two best friends and what happens when one of them gets into drugs and how that affects things. That's a much more closer to home thing that you guys are going to have to deal with. And that's going to segue into our conversations at the end of the year, where the idea of those are conversations you're going to have to start having. I understand that you guys have had the don't do drugs speeches, but that's not really that much of a connection to real life. When you guys get older, drugs don't enter your life because you're at a party and someone says, here, do drugs. Your introduction to drugs are going to be when you find out your best friend is doing them. And it's going to be sometime between 8th grade and freshman year, one of your friends will be drinking or doing drugs on some kind. I will guarantee it, because I stay in contact with all of my high schoolers. And when they come back, that's one of the things I ask them, is has that happened? And it will happen for many of you. Unfortunately, it's going to be this summer, between 7th and 8th grade, is that big summer, where for some reason that's that life step that's going to occur. For others of you, it won't be until sometime during 8th grade. For others of you, it'll be that next summer or into the freshman year. By the time you get to freshman year, you will have one of your friends, and you will have to have the conversations that happen in this book, which is why I like this book. We're going to open up conversations as we move along. I'm going to tell you about how it affected my life, how drugs and my friends and what I did in high school, and those choices I had to make, those are the conversations we're going to get into. Conversations that didn't connect to The Outsiders, because I can't tell you the story about the time my friend shanked somebody and we went on the run, because I can't tell that story. Or because it didn't happen, one or the other. And so those are the sort of things we're going to get into as we move forward with it. With that, I enjoy the book. This was the first book I remember crying during. I read The Outsiders when I was in 7th grade also, and I liked it, but I don't remember crying during the Johnny scene. I might have. I don't remember it. This was the first book that I remember actually crying during, and there's a scene at the end, and it's one that you very well may not cry during. It might not have that much of an effect on you. It's, for me, it was the scene between two friends and the whole idea of the drugs tearing them apart, and you see the fact that one of them has to make a choice about whether I'm going to throw my life away that I've been working for, or do I stick with this kid that's been my best friend forever. And you have to make this decision between your future or your friend. And it was one of those things I saw happening in my own life. And the fact that I saw that same path. Do you choose your friends, or do you choose a future that you know is strong? And it sucks. There's no other way around it. And that was sort of that connection for me. And I remember sitting at my grandparents' house when I was reading the book and just crying. I mean, not the big weepy tears. They were man tears, like, and I just like one shot out. But for me, that was a big step. But I remember that moment and going through and doing it. And so that's why I like going into and reading this one book. It's one that not a lot of teachers do because there's more adulty in the stuff that happens in it. Outsiders is good, and it's weird to think that Outsiders is more of a kiddie book because it deals with the whole shanking kids, but it is more of a kid book than this one is. This one's going to deal with much more of the kids making poor choices. Johnny and Ponyboy are good kids in The Outsiders. They do smoke, but they don't smoke pot. They just smoke cigarettes. Even there, they don't make a big deal out of it. They don't drink. They don't rob stores. They make good choices in their life. We're good kids, and for the most part, they are. In here, these kids are not good kids, and they're going to come right out and tell you, we're kind of jerks. It's what we do. And so they don't make a lot of good choices, and that's sort of how you guys are. And I mean that in the nicest way, but you're human. Humans make bad choices. And so they're much more relatable as we get into it. I'm going to read it with you to get through the first several chapters and to get through the chunks. The drawback is I had really cool pictures that I was going to show you about all these things, but since my flash drive is gone, I don't have that. I have that. So we're just going to have to use our imaginations, which makes things a bit more painful, but I'll see what I can do as we go through to help you guys out. And we're going to read the first 8 pages. Done. Start on page 9. The book starts on page 9, so you get the first 8 pages out of the way.
Wow.
I don't know. Look at it. Go to chapter 1, where it says Mark and Me. Look down at the page number.
How do you get to 9?
Yeah.
Fine. 1, 2, 3, 4,
You have to count the
5,
front.
6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah.
It counts every page in the book. I know. So like it's even better. You're like, I started on page 9, best book ever. This makes it even better. Heron.
Is this for you?
No, that's the S.E. Hinton. The girl who wrote The Outsiders. Her son's name was David, and so she wrote this one a couple years afterwards, and that was it starts in like early 1970s, but she wrote it for her son David,
So
which
you
was
wouldn't
not
do
me.
drugs?
What's that?
So you wouldn't do drugs?
No, but that's what she just dedicated the book to. I mean,
Do you
she-
have to dedicate a book to someone?
You don't have to.
Yeah.
It's just something most
Makes it feel
authors
special.
do at some point. Okay. Chapter 1. Mark and me went down to the bar/pool hall about 2 or 3 blocks from where we lived with the sole intention of making some money. We'd done that before. I was a really good pool player, especially for being just 16 years old, and what's more, I looked like a baby-faced kid who wouldn't know one ball from another. Well, this, and the way Mark set me up, helped me hustle a lot of pool games. The bad deal is, it's against the law to be in this pool hall if you're underage, because of the adjoining bar. The good deal is, the bartender and owner was a good friend of mine, being the older brother of this chick I used to like. When this chick and me broke up, I still stayed friends with her brother, which is unusual in cases like that. Charlie, the bartender, was just 22, but he had a tough reputation and he kept order real good. We lived in kind of a rough part of town, and some pretty wild things went on in Charlie's bar. I looked around for a plainclothes cop when we went in. I can always tell a cop, but didn't find one. So I went up to the bar and hopped on a bar stool. Do you guys know what a plainclothes cop is?
Undercover
this-
cop.
Yeah, undercover. And they're making sure that, hoodlums and kids aren't trying to drink underage, so Brian, the guy talking, is like, I can always pick out undercover popos.
Is there a movie for this?
Yeah. What's that?
Is there a movie for this?
There is. Those of you who did the Outsiders, if you did the audio ones, like I said, I have them online. If you just did the movie, the Outsiders movie is pretty good. The movie for this one's awful. It is just bad. The Outsiders movie is good. The part of the problem of being bad, it also means you can't really find it anywhere because people are like, you don't want to watch that movie. It doesn't follow the book. The acting is atrocious in it. It does have the Emilio Estevez, who was from The Outsiders you saw the movie. Guy that did the Switchblade. I can't think of his. Not Dally. Two-Bit. He was Two-Bit in The Outsiders, the movie, and so he comes back and is in this one and plays Mark, but it was just a bad movie. So if you're just planning on watching the movie, I apologize. Do the
Yeah,
audiobook.
can we?
It's just not good. I went up to the bar and hopped on a bar stool. Give me a beer, I said. And Charlie, who was cleaning glasses, just like every bartender you ever see, gave me a dirty look instead. Okay, I said brightly. A Coke. Your credit ain't so hot, Brian, Charlie said. You got cash? A dime, for crying out loud. Can't you let me charge a dime Coke? Cokes are 15 cents, and you already got $3 worth of Cokes charged here. And if you don't pay up this month, I'll have to beat it out of you. He said it real friendly like, but he meant it. We were friends, but Charlie was a businessman too. I'll pay up, I assured him. Don't worry. Charlie gave me a lopsided grin. I ain't worried, kid. You're the one who should be worried. I was, to tell the truth. Charlie was a big, tough guy, so a $3 beating up was something to worry about. To do the quick math, $3 beating back then is how a $3 beating today. Because how much were Cokes back then?
15 cents.
Yeah, and so he had $3 worth, which is like 30 of them. And so how much for Cokes today?
$1 maybe.
$1.50. So you're looking at like $30 and $50 is how much he had borrowed from the guy. So it's more like a $50 beating, if that makes. I mean, don't beat people. That's bad. But a $50 beating makes more sense than like a $3 beating. Hey, Mark, Charlie called. There ain't nobody here to hustle. Mark, who'd been scouting out the two guys playing pool, came up and sat down next to me. Yeah, that's the truth. It's just as well, Charlie said. You guys are going to get in real bad trouble one of these days. Some guy's going to get hacked off when he finds out what you're doing, and you're going to get a pool stick rammed down your throats. No, we ain't, Mark said. Give me a Coke, Charlie. We don't have any credit, I said glumly. Mark stared at Charlie disbelievingly. You gotta be kidding. Man, when did we ever not pay our bill? Last month? You said you'd add it on to this month's. That's what you said. So I don't see why you can't add 20 cents to that. 30 cents, corrected Charlie. And like I just told Brian, if I don't get that money pretty soon, I'm going to take it out of a couple of highs. I'll get you the money tomorrow if you give us the Cokes right now. Okay. Charlie gave in to Mark. Almost everybody does. It was a gift he had. A gift for getting away with things. He could talk anyone into anything. But if I don't get the money by tomorrow, I'll come looking for you. I got chilled. I'd heard Charlie say that to another guy once. I also saw the guy after Charlie found him. But if Mark said he'd have $3 by tomorrow, he'd have it. Speaking of looking for you, Charlie continued, the true flower child was in here asking for you. Eminem? Mark asked. What did he want? How would I know? Man, that's a weird kid. Nice guy, but weird. Yeah, Mark said. I guess it would be hard to be a hippie in a hood's part of town. Speak for yourself, man, Charlie said. This part of town don't make nobody a hood. You're right, Mark said. But I really sounded profound there for a minute, huh? Charlie just gave him a funny look and got us the Cokes. It was later in the evening now. Some more customers came in, so Charlie quit talking to us. It got pretty busy. When are you going to get $3? Asked Mark. He finished off his Coke. I don't know. That bugged the heck out of me. Real quick, they're going to talk about hippies. This is set in the early 1970s, and hippies are going to play a role in the story, especially Eminem. Not Eminem, the little white boy rapper, but Eminem, this guy in the book. And Eminem is a hippie. And what is a hippie? Lolo?
I'll answer your question and then I can say my thing.
Sure.
Okay, a hippie is like they have longer hair. They're kind of different.
They are.
You can tell them they're more about like peace.
They are about peace.
And
Tie-dye shirts.
Yeah, tie-dye shirts.
Little fingers held like that.
Yeah.
Like that. And so that was the hippies they're talking about.
Don't they like
So my grandpa was a hippie in the 70s.
Yes.
And one day he went to a gas station and he pulled in, got out of his car, and a guy put a gun on his top of his car and said, "You can't get gas here."
They didn't like hippies. Haters. Yes.
So aren't they, don't they, do a lot of drugs?
And that's what you'll find out. This kid, Eminem, doesn't necessarily. He's just into The idea was much more the be friendly, be nice to others, anti-war, and then they sort of got combined with the drug culture. Now the hippies and drugs are much more synonymous. At the time, it was just sort of a movement of being nice to other people. And then he also talks about being a hood. You guys know what a hood is?
Hood rat.
It is like a hood rat.
Juvenile
Juvenile delinquent. Sort of the greasers from the Outsiders, those were hoods. Hoodlums, hood rats, delinquents, thugs, gangsters, kids with issues, agent.
Aren't they like the people who like everything to be organic?
Yes, the hippies. Very much so again. Oh, nice one. And with Mark, he's going to be the friend, I don't know if you guys have a friend that manages to get themselves out of trouble by like sweet-talking people all the time. Like when teachers yell at them, they do like a smile like, oh, I've got dimples, you can't yell at me, blinky,
George
blinky.
Siciliano.
And so it's that same thing. That's how Mark is. He's very good about not getting in trouble and doing the blinky, blinky, look at me, I'm adorable kind of thing. That bugged the heck out of me. Mark was always pulling stunts like that. I mean, I ought to know. Mark had lived at my house ever since I was 10 and he was 9, and his parents shot each other in a drunken argument. My old lady felt sorry for him and took him home to live with us. My mother wanted 100 kids and have only one. So until she got hold of Mark, she had to be content feeding every stray cat that came along. There was no telling how many kids she might have picked up along the line if she could have afforded more than 2, me and Mark. I'd been friends with Mark long before he came to live with us. He lived down the street, and it seemed to me that we'd always been together. We never had a fight. We never even had an argument. In looks, we were complete opposites. I'm a big guy, dark-haired, eyes, the kind who looks like a St. Bernard puppy, which I don't mind, as most chicks cannot resist a St. Bernard puppy. The St. Bernard puppy, if you guys are St. Bernard are the dogs in the cartoons that go out like in the winter in the snow, people get trapped and they have like the big barrel around their necks and like woof,
Like
woof.
Beethoven.
Yeah, like Beethoven. Nicely done.
Good job, Lake.
Cujo, along the same lines, yeah. I don't remember exactly what Cujo, but it sounds like that. Yeah, the big, that's what he is. And so Brian, the guy, the narrator, is a big, adorable, fluffy guy that the chicks dig,
Fluffy.
apparently. Like hair is like fluffy and
Oh.
brown, like the fluffy brown. Chicks dig fluffy guys. Whatever.
Fluffy.
Mark was small and compact. Strange golden eyes and hair to match, and a grin like a friendly lion. He was much stronger than he looked. He could tie me in arm wrestling. He was my best friend, and we were like brothers. Let's go look for Eminem, Mark said abruptly, and we left. It was dark outside and seemed a little chilly. This was probably because school had just started, and it always seems like fall when school starts, even if it's hot. Charlie's Bar was on a real crummy street with a lot of other bars whose bartenders kicked us out when we strolled in. A movie house, a drug store, and a secondhand clothes store that always had a sign in the window saying, "We buy almost anything." And from the looks of their clothes, they did. When my old lady went to the hospital, we got so low on money that I bought some clothes there. It's pretty lousy buying used clothes. We found Eminem in the drugstore reading Newsweek, which shows what a weird kid he was, since there were plenty of skin mags and things to read. A little kid like him shouldn't be reading that junk, I know, but you should at least want to. Agent?
When it says the guy, he was talking about himself and says big dark hair, big guy, dark hair and eyes. Not a lot of people have eyes.
Big dark eyes. So he's got big brown eyes, big brown hair.
Oh.
Hey! Sorry. Hey! Charlie said you was looking for us. Mark greeted him. Eminem looked up at him. Yeah, how you guys doing? Eminem was the most serious guy I knew. He always had this wide-eyed, intent, trusting look on his face, but sometimes he smiled. And when he did, it was really great. He was an awful nice kid, even if he was a little strange. He had big gray eyes, the kinds you see on war orphan posters, and charcoal-colored hair down past his ears and down to his eyebrows. He probably would have grown a beard, except 13 was too young for it. He always wore an old army jacket that was too big for him and went barefoot, even after it started getting cold. Then his father got fed up with it, and Eminem got a pair of moccasins. He had a metal peace symbol hanging around his neck on a piece of rawhide string. He got his nickname from his addiction to M&Ms, the kind of chocolate candy that melts in your mouth, not in your hand. For years, I'd never seen Eminem without a bag of that candy. I don't know how he ate those things all day long, day after day. If I did that, my face would break out like nothing you've ever seen. You want an M&M? He held out a bag toward us. I shook my head, but Mark took one just to be polite, since he didn't like sweet stuff. You wanted to see us for something? Mark reminded him. Yeah, I did, but I forgot what for. He was like that, real absent-minded. My sister's home, he added as an afterthought. No kidding, asked Mark tactfully, thumbing through a bad magazine. Which one? M&M had a million brothers and sisters, most of them younger. They all looked alike, and it was really funny to see them out somewhere with 4 or 5 little carbon copies. Dark hair, big serious eyes, hanging all over them. If I had to be a babysitter day and night, I'd lose my temper and kill one of those brats. But then, M&M never lost his temper. My older sister, Kathy, you know. Yeah, I remember, I said. Only I didn't remember too well. Where's she been? She went to a private school last year and this summer. She's been staying with my aunt. She had to come home, though, because she ran out of money. She paid for it all with her own bread. Oh, must be smart, I said. I couldn't remember what she looked like. I never paid any attention to her. She as smart as you? No, M said, still reading. You wasn't bragging. Just telling the truth. He was a very honest kid. Let's go over to the bowling alley, Mark suggested. The drugstore wasn't exactly jumping with action. It was a school night and nobody was hanging around. You come too, M&M. It was a long walk to the bowling alley. I wished for the 100th time I had a car. I had to walk everywhere I went. As if he'd read my mind, which he was in the habit of doing, Mark said, I could hotwire us a car. That's a bad thing to do. You guys know what hotwire means?
Yeah.
Yeah, steel, like,
This kind of scares me how quickly you guys do that. What is hotwire?
Starting a car.
Davies.
Isn't it like where you open the dashboard and
Yeah.
you like take the wires and connect them so the
And
car's
why would someone need to hotwire a car?
Then you
Steal
can steal it.
Because you don't have the key, and why would you need
Oh.
to start a car that you don't have a key to?
Because you're stealing it.
Yeah.
Usually because you're stealing it. And so that's what the thing is with the hotwire, you pull it off and you ching ching, that's how you start it. Mark doesn't do it that well, he hotwires it, but his goal is not to steal a car. Mark's thing is he doesn't own a car, so he's like, I just want to get from one place to another, so he'll just go find a car on the street, open it, hotwire it, drive it around at night, then when he's done, he goes and returns it at the same spot. So he's like, I'm not stealing the car, I'm just borrowing the car. There's nothing wrong with that. He's like, I'm not doing anything bad. And apparently the police disagree, they still think that's stealing for some reason. Popos, what are you gonna do? You know. I could hotwire us a car. That's a bad thing to do, M&M said. Taking something that doesn't belong to you. Hey, it ain't stealing, Mark said. It's borrowing. Yeah, well, you're on probation now for borrowing, so I don't think it's such a great idea. Mark could hotwire anything, and ever since he was 12 years old, he'd hotwired cars and driven them. He'd never had an accident, but he finally got caught at it. So now, once a week, he had to go downtown on his school lunch hour to see his probation officer and tell him how he was never going to steal cars anymore. I'd been worried at first, afraid they were going to take Mark and put him in a boys' home since he wasn't really my brother and didn't have a family. I was worried about Mark being locked up. I didn't need to. Mark always came through everything untouched, unworried, and unaffected. Okay, Mark shrugged. Don't get shook, Brian. Brian? M&M said suddenly. Were you named after the Lord? What? I said, stunned. For a minute, wait a minute, God. Lord Brian? Were you named after him? The poor kid had Byron, B-Y-R-O-N, and Brian, B-R-Y-O-N, mixed up. I decided to string him along. Yeah, I was. Was there a Lord Brian? Mark said. Hey, that's cool. Well, I guess it's cool. What did this guy do anyway? Oh, I can't tell you in front of a kid, I answered. M&M shook his head. He wrote poetry. He wrote long old poems. You ought to write poetry, just to keep up the tradition of the Bryans. Well, you ought to keep your mouth shut before I keep up the tradition of punching wise guys in the mouth. M&M looked at me. I realized from his hurt, puzzled look that he hadn't been trying to be smart, so I punched him on the shoulder and said, okay, I'll write poetry. How's this? And I recited a dirty limerick I'd heard somewhere. It made him laugh and turn red at the same time. Mark thought I'd made it up and said, hey, that was pretty good. Can you just pop them off like that? I only shrugged and said, sometimes. Because then I'd take credit whether or not it was really due to me. I was like that. I'd also lie if I really thought I could get away with it, especially to girls. Like telling them I loved them and junk when I didn't. I had a rep as a lady killer, a hustler. Nowadays, we'd probably call him a player. That's what I thought. Player. P-L-Y. P-L-A-Y-A. I kept up the old Lord Byron tradition in one way. Sometimes I'd get to feeling bad, think about how rotten I treated some of these chicks, but most of the time, it didn't even bother me. Eminem, old buddy, Mark was saying, putting his arm across Eminem's shoulders. I was wondering if you might be able to loan your best friend some money. Well, you ain't my best friend, Eminem said with disarming honesty. But how much do you want? $3? I got 50 cents. Eminem reached into his jeans pocket, pulled out a couple of quarters. Here! Forget it, I said. Me and Mark looked at each other and shook our heads. Eminem was unbelievable. It's okay. I'll get 50 cents again next week for babysitting. Is that all you get paid for watching all those kids? 50 cents? Couldn't get over it. 50 cents a week? Oh, I think it's enough. I don't mind taking care of the kids. Who's going to do it if I don't? Both my parents work, so they can't do it. Anyway, I like my family. When I get married, I'm going to have at least 9 or 10 kids. Oh, well, there goes the population explosion, Mark said. Well, now that your sister's home, she can do a lot of the babysitting, I said, trying to be helpful. Eminem could tell we thought he was crazy. No, Kathy's got a job after school. She can't help. I don't know what I have to do to convince you that I don't mind it. Okay, I'm convinced. I was also tired of the subject and got to worrying about how we were going to get $3 before tomorrow. Charlie didn't get his rough rep or his bar by being nice to people, especially ones who couldn't pay their bills. Lolo?
Aren't they saying it wrong when he says Mark and me and Mark? Isn't it supposed to be Mark and I?
They don't always have the best grammar. That's probably what you're going to get to. Because they're trying to do it as if that's how he would speak. And he's not necessarily he's a smart kid, but not the smartest kid.
Ponyboy smart?
Maybe not Ponyboy smart, but smart enough. By the time we got to the bowling alley, it was 10 o'clock, and there weren't many people there. Mark and I watched a few games while Eminem stared into a package of M&Ms. I finally got bugged about it and asked him what the Sam Hill was he doing. Take a look. He handed me the package, which was open at the top. Put it right up to your eye. I did. All I saw was a bunch of candy. It's beautiful, ain't it? Asked Eminem. I mean, look at all the different colors. Yeah, I agreed, thinking, if I didn't know this kid better, I'd swear he was high. Well, let me look, said Mark. So I handed him the package. Hey, this is groovy. Look at all the colors. He gave the candy back to Eminem, looked at me, shrugged. Eminem got up. I gotta go home now. I'll see you guys later. We just got here, Mark objected. Yeah, well, I just came along for the walk. Now I gotta go home. I watched him leave. Kid's weird. That's all there is to it. Mark lit up a cigarette, our last one, so we had to pass it back and forth. I know, but I still get a kick out of him. Come on, let's go catch up with him. There ain't nothing to do around here. Outside, I spotted Eminem at the corner. There were 3 guys trailing him. When you see something like that around here, you know right away somebody is about to get jumped. In this case, it was Eminem. Come on, Mark said, and we cut through an alley so to come up behind those guys. 3 against 3. The odds would have been even, except that Eminem was one of those non-violent types who practiced what he preached, and me and Mark weren't carrying weapons. We slowed down to a walk when we came to the end of the alley. I could hear the voices of the 3 guys who were following Eminem, and I recognized one of them. Hey, flower child, turn around! They were taunting him, and Eminem just kept right on moving. It's Shepard, Mark whispered to me. We were waiting at the end of the alley for them to come by. They didn't. They must have had Eminem up against the wall. We could hear them. Hey, hippie, don't you answer when you're spoken to? That ain't nice. Curly, why don't you leave me alone? Eminem sounded very patient. I moved over to the other side of the alley, just in time to see Curly pull out a switchblade, reach over, and cut through the rawhide string on Eminem's piece metal. It fell to the ground. Eminem reached down to pick it up, and Curly brought his knee up sharply and hit Eminem in the face. Me and Mark looked at each other, and Mark flashed me a grin. We both liked fights. We ran out and jumped on him. and the one we didn't get took off, which was a wise thing for him to do. Since we'd surprised him, it wasn't too hard to get him pinned. I had Curly Shepherd in a stranglehold with one arm twisted behind his back, while Mark had the other guy pinned on the ground. "How'd you like a broken arm, Shepherd?" I said through gritted teeth, careful not to loosen my grip. His switchblade had fallen on the sidewalk, but I didn't know what all he might be carrying. He liked to play rough. "Okay, you proved your point. Let's go, Douglas." That'd be Brian's last name, Brian Douglas. Curly said a few more things that I'm not going to repeat. He must have figured out who it was twisting his arm when he saw Mark. Me and Mark were always together. Curly had a special grudge against me anyway. I used to go with his sister. She says she broke up with me, which was the truth, but I was spreading it around that I broke up with her and was giving all kinds of cool reasons. Curly was a little dumb. He belonged to a gang led by his brother Tim, known as the Shepherd Gang. Yeah, really original. Tim was alright, at least he had a few brains, but I considered Curly a dumb hood. Look, we didn't hurt him. That was a lie, because Eminem was sitting there against the wall. Already his cheek was swelling up and turning purple. He was trying to tie the ends of his rawhide string together. His hands were shaking. "Let him go," said Eminem. "I'm okay." I gave Curly's arm an extra twist for good measure, then gave him a shove that almost sent him sprawling. Mark let the other guy up, but when he was almost to his feet, Mark gave him a good swift kick. They left, cussing us out, partly in English and partly in sign language. Hopefully you can figure that one out. They were telling them if they were number one.
Which kind of sign language?
We're not going to demonstrate right now. Mark was helping Eminem up. "Come on, kid," he said easily. "Let's get you home." The whole side of Eminem's face was bruised, but he gave us one of his rare, wistful grins. "Thanks, you guys." Mark suddenly laughed. "Hey, look what I got!" He waved 3 $1 bills at me. "Where'd you get that?" I asked, although I knew good and well where he got it. Mark was very quick. Nobody had to teach him how to hotwire a car or to pick a pocket. "It was a donation," Mark said seriously, "for the cause." This was an old joke, but Eminem fell for it. "What cause?" "'Cause we owe it to Charlie," Mark said, and Eminem almost laughed, but instead winced with pain. I was really feeling good. I could quit worrying about Charlie's beating us up. Mark suddenly poked me. "You still in the mood for a little action?" And there we'll stop.
Oh, I know what they're gonna do.
Sure.
Me too. Alright, now is the part where I'm going to have you guys bring the books back up. Hang on.